Imagine waking up to the smell of fresh wood smoke, roasting figs and Mediterranean sea air. You open your eyes, stretch your arms, and realize you are lying on a hard stone bench in a bustling, sunlit plaza. People are walking past you wearing linen tunics and leather sandals. Shouts in fluent, fast-paced Latin echo off white marble arches. You look down at your clothes. Then up at the towering, beautiful green mountain framing the northern sky. Your brain scrambles to make sense of the scenery until you spot a fresco on a nearby wall depicting a snake offering a sacrifice to local hearth gods. It hits you with the force of a runaway chariot. This is Pompeii, but before you can appreciate the architectural beauty or try to find a place that serves ancient pizza, your internal calendar clicks into place. You check a nearby public sundial, piece together the signs around you, and realize today is August 23rd, 79 AD. You are exactly 24 hours away from one of the most famous and horrifying natural disasters in human history. By this exact time tomorrow, Mount Vesuvius will tear itself apart, launching a catastrophic column of superheated ash, rock, and toxic gas into the stratosphere, burying this entire resort town under 20 feet of volcanic debris. You know exactly what is coming. You know how it starts. You know how it ends. And you know that if you do not get out of here, you will become a plaster cast in a modern museum. But as you stand up and look at the 20,000 innocent people living their daily lives around you, a massive moral weight drops onto your shoulders. You cannot just run away and save yourself. You have to save them too. But here is your nightmare logistics dilemma. You are a complete nobody in a highly rigid, highly suspicious Roman society. You have no money, no political status, no allies. And worst of all, you are speaking a version of history that sounds like absolute insanity to the locals. If you start running through the streets screaming that the mountain is about to explode, you will not trigger a mass evacuation. You will just trigger a prompt arrest by the local night watch, leaving you locked in an iron cage beneath the city when the sky finally turns to fire. To save Pompeii, you have to play a high-stakes, real-time strategy game against time, psychology, and geology. The clock is ticking and your first hour starts right now. Before you can even begin to formulate an escape plan or try to convince a single Roman to pack their bags, you have to understand the profound level of complacency you are up against. To the citizens of Pompeii in 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius is not a threat, it is a blessing. The mountain has been completely quiet for centuries, so quiet that the ancient Greeks and Romans do not even look at it as a volcano. To them, it is just an unusually fertile, exceptionally beautiful mountain covered in luxury vineyards, olive groves, and the sprawling villas of Rome's wealthiest elites. The volcanic soil is the literal engine of Pompeii's booming economy, producing world-class wine that is shipped across the entire Mediterranean. But beneath this peaceful green paradise, a geological nightmare has been brewing for thousands of years. Vesuvius is a stratovolcano, notorious for its long periods of silence followed by explosive cataclysmic eruptions, because the vent of the volcano has been completely plugged by hardened, solid rock for generations. The immense pressure from the magma chamber miles beneath the earth has had nowhere to go. It has been building, compressing, and churning, waiting for the weakest link in the rock to snap. To make matters worse, you have to understand the psychological armor the Romans have built against the physical warning signs for the past 16 years. The region has been plagued by frequent earthquakes. In 62 AD, a massive quake leveled large portions of Pompeii and neighboring Herculaneum. But instead of seeing these tremors as the awakening groans of a volcanic the Romans viewed them as a routine nuisance. They simply cleaned up the rubble, hired teams of skilled bricklayers, and rebuilt their luxury homes bigger and grander than before. In fact, on the morning you arrive, half the city is still technically a construction zone, with workers repairing public temples and installing beautiful new mosaic floors. The citizens are completely desensitized to the earth shaking. To them, a minor tremor is just a minor inconvenience, like a modern flight delay. You are trying to warn people about a monster they literally do not believe exists, which brings you face to face with your very first major roadblock, the language barrier. You sprint toward the nearest crowded market area, determined to find an audience and explain the impending doom. You find a busy open-air food stall, a thermopolium, where locals are buying hot stews and cups of spiced wine. You wave your arms, clear your throat, and prepare to deliver a life-saving warning. But as you open your mouth, you realize a terrifying linguistic truth that your history textbooks completely left out. The ancient Romans do not have a word for volcano. Let that sink in for a moment. The concept of an exploding mountain that spews molten rock and ash does not exist in their vocabulary. The word volcano actually derives from the Italian island of Vulcano, which itself was named after Vulcan, the Roman god of fire and forge. But in 79 AD, that linguistic evolution has not happened yet. If you try to translate modern terms into basic Latin, you will find yourself shouting about a mountain that is going to vomit fire and rain hot dirt. To a sophisticated Roman citizen, you do not sound like a visionary scientist. You sound like a severely uneducated peasant who has had way too much cheap, unwatered wine. If you use terms like tectonic plates, magma chambers, or pyroclastic surges, you will receive nothing but blank, uncomprehending stares. You have to understand that the Roman worldview is deeply rooted in religion, philosophy, and practical engineering. They explain the movements of the earth through the whims of the gods or the trapped winds inside subterranean caverns. If you want to change their behavior, you have to completely abandon your 21st century scientific vocabulary and learn to speak to them through their own cultural lens. But before you can even attempt to refine your message, you run directly into the rigid brick wall of Roman law and social hierarchy. Take a look around the crowded streets of Pompeii. Notice how people are dressed and how they interact. Roman society is not a democracy where every voice is weighed equally. It is a highly structured, intensely class-conscious system governed by status, wealth, and legal authority. At the very top are the patricians and the elected magistrates, the duoviri, who hold absolute administrative power over the city. Below them are the wealthy merchants, followed by the plebeians, the freedmen, and finally the massive population of enslaved people who keep the city running. In this world, you are lower than a slave. You do not have a patron. You do not have a recognizable family name. You do not have a legal identity. And you do not possess a single bronze sestertius coin to your name. If you stand on a street corner in the Forum and begin shouting at citizens to abandon their businesses and flee the city, you are committing a serious public offense. The local authorities are intensely protective of public order. Rome thrives on stability, and causing an artificial panic that disrupts the collection of taxes, the operations of the harbor, or the trade of valuable commodities is a quick way to get yourself beaten by the lictors or thrown into a deep, dark cell. To successfully organize a mass evacuation with zero personal authority, you have to stop acting like a prophet and start acting like a shadow puppet master. You cannot force people out through the city gates by your own words. You have to find the natural levers of power within Pompeii and manipulate them so that the systems already in place do the work for you. But to do that, you need evidence. You need to look for the physical warning signs that the volcano itself is providing. Signs that are happening right under the Romans' noses but are being completely misinterpreted. The ticking geological clocks. As you walk through the residential neighborhoods of Pompeii, you decide to look for the subtle, terrifying clues that Vesuvius is preparing its assault. Even though the main explosive eruption is still hours away, the volcano is already actively changing the environment around the Bay of Naples, and you know exactly where to look. Your first stop is the local public fountains. Pompeii is famous for its advanced engineering, supplied by a massive imperial aqueduct system known as the Aqua Augusta. This system channels fresh water from the mountains directly into public basins, private villas, and the massive public bath complexes. But as you approach a fountain near the Street of Abundance, you notice something alarming. The water has stopped flowing. The stone basin is completely dry. To the average Roman citizen, this is just a routine infrastructure failure. They assume there is a leak somewhere along the aqueduct line or that the local water administrators are performing standard maintenance. But you know the terrifying truth. The rising magma chamber beneath Vesuvius is causing the ground around the mountain to swell and tilt. This subtle deformation has cracked the underground channels of the aqueduct, completely severing the city's water supply. Next, you walk down toward the sea and observe the behavior of the animals. You notice that the local stray dogs are howling uncontrollably, refusing to enter indoor spaces. Birds are taking off from the slopes of Vesuvius in massive, chaotic flocks flying south away from the mountain. Even the rats are openly fleeing the basements and sewers, scrambling across the stone streets in broad daylight. The animals can feel the microtremors and smell the low levels of toxic sulfur gas seeping through the soil, signals that are completely invisible to human senses. The geological clock is ticking louder and louder. You have the evidence, but you still do not have the ears of the people. It is time to execute your first major strategic move. You are going to weaponize their own religion. If the Romans will not listen to modern science, they will absolutely listen to the gods. Roman religion is entirely transactional, based on the concept of pax deorum, or the peace with the gods. If you perform the correct rituals, make the right sacrifices, and pay attention to divine omens, the gods will protect you. If you ignore the omens, the gods will destroy you. By an incredible stroke of historical irony, the date of your arrival, August 23rd, happens to be the literal festival of Vulcanalia. This is the one day of the year dedicated entirely to Vulcan, the god of destructive fire and volcanoes. The timing is almost too perfect to be real. Right now, families all over Pompeii are preparing to celebrate by lighting fires, offering small fish and animals to the flames, and praying for protection against devastating house fires and urban blazes. This is your golden ticket. You do not need to explain geology. You need to perform prophecy. You find your way to the Temple of Jupiter, situated prominently at the northern end of the forum, with Mount Vesuvius looming perfectly in the background behind its grand marble columns. You observe the local priests preparing for the afternoon sacrifices. You know from historical accounts that the earthquakes will intensify significantly over the next few hours. You position yourself near the steps of the temple, waiting for the exact moment a minor tremor rattles the stone floor. As the ground shakes and the crowd gasps, you throw yourself to the ground, pointing dramatically at the green mountain behind the temple. You cry out that Vulcan has rejected their sacrifices, that the mountain is his forge, and that he is waking up to consume the city in fire because the sacred laws have been broken. You use their own festival against them, framing the drying fountains and the fleeing animals not as natural events, but as explicit divine warnings from Vulcan himself. The crowd begins to murmur. You have successfully planted the first seed of doubt, but to turn this doubt into a full-scale evacuation, you need to convince someone with the actual power to move the masses. A crowd of frightened peasants in the forum is a good start, but if you want to save thousands of lives at once, you need to convince the people who control the gates, the ships, and the guard. You need to target the city's elite. You decide to seek out one of Pompeii's most influential and wealthy citizens, Aulus Umbricius Scaurus. He is the undisputed tycoon of garum, the highly prized, intensely popular fermented fish sauce that dominates Roman cuisine. Scaurus owns multiple factories, a massive fleet of merchant shipping vessels down at the port, and a luxurious villa adorned with beautiful mosaics celebrating his financial empire. Getting an audience with a man of this stature as a nameless stranger is nearly impossible. But you know the secret rules of Roman society. Every morning, wealthy patricians hold a ritual known as the salutio. They open the doors of their grand homes to receive their clients, dependents, and anyone seeking favors, distributing small gifts or food in exchange for political loyalty and respect. You blend into the crowd of clients and slip past the columns into the atrium of Scaurus' magnificent villa. When it is finally your turn to approach the tycoon, you do not beg for money. You lean in and whisper a piece of hyper-specific business intelligence that no one in 79 AD could possibly know. You tell him that within 12 hours, the sea level in the harbor will drastically drop, trapping his entire merchant fleet against the seabed. You tell him that the underground storage vaults of his competitors are already cracking due to the swelling of the earth, and that if he does not order his captains to load his entire inventory of garum onto his ships and sail out to open water immediately, his life's work will be buried in stone by tomorrow afternoon. Scaurus is a practical, cold-hearted businessman. He doesn't necessarily believe your stories about the mountain exploding, but he is intensely protective of his wealth. The detail you provided about the harbor and the vaults is so specific, so eerie, that it completely rattles his confidence. He sends a trusted slave down to the docks to check the waterline. You have successfully put the economic elite on high alert. Now, it is time to take your psychological warfare to the most volatile place in the city, the Grand Marketplace. To understand how to move a Roman city, you have to understand its stomach. The heart of Pompeii's daily life is the Macellum, the grand covered market where fresh meat, fish, grain, and imported goods are traded every single day. If you can disrupt the economy of the Macellum, you can disrupt the entire city. By mid-afternoon, your warning to Scaurus begins to bear fruit. Word reaches the market that the wealthy fish sauce tycoon is abruptly pulling his ships out of the harbor and ordering his laborers to pack up his luxury goods. At the same time, the minor earthquakes are becoming more frequent, occurring every 20 to 30 minutes. The decorative roof tiles of the market stalls are starting to slide off and shatter on the stone pavement below. You seize this moment of growing tension to launch a highly coordinated rumor campaign. You move from stall to stall, whispering to the grain merchants, the butchers, and the slave traders. You do not tell them to run because of a volcano. You tell them that the imperial government in Rome has secretly caught wind of a massive impending slave rebellion or a foreign invasion, and that the local magistrates are planning to close the city gates by midnight to ration all the remaining food for the army. In ancient times, rumors of political instability or military lockdowns were the ultimate triggers for economic panic. Merchants realized that if the gates are locked, their perishable goods will rot, their profits will disappear, and they will be trapped in a conflict zone. Greed and self-preservation are incredibly powerful motivators. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the market shifts from casual shopping to frantic preparation. Merchants begin packing up their expensive wares into heavy wooden carts. The panic is no longer a hidden whisper. It is starting to spill out into the main thoroughfares of the city. The sun sets behind the Bay of Naples, casting long, ominous shadows across the stone streets of Pompeii. It is now the night of August 23rd. You have roughly 12 hours left before the point of no return. The physical warnings from Vesuvius are no longer subtle. The frequent earthquakes have caused several older wooden structures near the slums to collapse. Thick black smoke mixed with the distinct choking smell of rotten eggs. Hydrogen sulfide gas is beginning to waft down from the summit of the mountain, blotting out the stars. The city is caught in a strange, tense limbo. A significant portion of the population, specifically the wealthy elites who listen to the economic rumors or notice the drying water lines, have already quietly loaded their carriages and left through the western gates toward their secondary estates in Naples or Rome. The port is a scene of organized chaos with ships slipping away into the dark ocean, but thousands of citizens are still inside the walls. The poorest plebeians, the enslaved workers, and the stubborn property owners refuse to leave their homes. They lock their wooden doors, light small oil lamps, and pray to their household gods, the lares, hoping that the earth will simply calm down by morning. You spend the midnight hours walking through the dark, stone-paved alleys. You realize that you cannot save every single person through clever manipulation. You have done everything you can to trigger a systemic evacuation. But now it comes down to basic raw human survival. You find a place to rest near the Herculaneum gate at the northwest corner of the city. You need to keep your strength up because you know that when the sun rises, the real nightmare begins. Morning arrives on August 24th, 79 AD. The air is heavy, hot, and strangely still. The sky is a weird, hazy gray. Even though the sun should be shining brightly over the Mediterranean, the city of Pompeii wakes up in a state of exhaustion. The earthquakes have been constant throughout the night, preventing anyone from getting a full night of sleep. Despite the ominous atmosphere, the standard routines of Roman life stubbornly attempt to reassert themselves. Bakers are firing up their massive brick ovens to bake the morning bread. Street vendors are setting out their remaining goods. The local magistrates are gathering at the basilica to discuss the public disturbances and property damage caused by the overnight tremors. They are actively considering declaring a state of emergency to restore order. But their concept of an emergency is a riot, not a geological cataclysm. You stand near the city walls. Watching the remaining population move about like ghosts in a graveyard, you look up at Vesuvius. The mountain looks completely different now. The beautiful green forests and vineyards are covered in a thin layer of gray dust that has been seeping from the cracks in the summit. The tension in the air is so thick you can practically feel it in your teeth. You know that the magma chamber has finally cracked the solid rock plug. The pressure has reached its absolute maximum limit. It is exactly 1 p.m. Suddenly, a sound louder than 1,000 thunderclaps rips through the air, completely shattering the morning silence. The entire earth violently bucks upward, throwing people off their feet. You look toward the mountain and watch the summit literally disintegrate. A massive, terrifying black column of ash, pumice, and superheated rock shoots straight into the sky at twice the speed of sound, rising 12 miles high into the atmosphere until it hits the tropopause, spreading out horizontally like a giant, demonic pine tree. The Plinian eruption has officially begun. The initial reaction of the remaining citizens is absolute, paralyzing shock. For a few minutes, there is total silence as thousands of eyes stare up at the 20-mile-high cloud of stone blotting out the midday sun, turning day into pitch-black night. Then the sky begins to rain, but it isn't raining water. It is raining white pumice stones, lapilli, and fragments of dense, heavy volcanic rock. The rocks hit the terracotta roof tiles with a deafening, continuous clattering sound, quickly accumulating on the streets at a rate of several inches per hour. This is the exact moment where your 21st century scientific knowledge becomes your literal shield. Because you know the precise mechanics of how this disaster unfolds, information that will mean the difference between life and death. The natural instinct of most Romans is to run indoors, lock their doors, and hide under their heavy wooden tables or concrete roofs to shield themselves from the falling stones. You know this is a fatal mistake. Volcanic pumice is incredibly light, but as it accumulates feet deep on the flat roofs of Roman villas, the sheer weight becomes immense. Within a few hours, the wooden support beams of the ceilings will catastrophically collapse inward, crushing anyone hiding underneath them. You sprint through the darkness, which is illuminated only by the constant violent flashes of volcanic lightning dancing inside the ash cloud. You scream at anyone you see to stay out in the open, to protect their heads with pillows and tunics tied with leather straps, and to move directly toward the southern gates of the city. Away from the mountain, you know the clock is ticking faster than ever. The falling rock is just phase 1. The real killer is phase 2, the pyroclastic flows. Within a few hours, the massive column of ash hovering over Vesuvius will become too heavy to support its own weight. It will collapse under gravity, sending a series of avalanches of superheated toxic gas and volcanic rock screaming down the slopes of the mountain at over 200 miles per hour, heating the air to a lethal 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Anyone left inside the city walls when the first pyroclastic flow hits will be instantly incinerated. Your window of escape is closing by the minute. You scramble through the western marine gate, pushing through the thick ankle-deep drifts of falling pumice stones, holding a heavy woolen tunic tight over your nose and mouth to filter out the choking volcanic ash. You join the chaotic, terrifying mass exodus of survivors scrambling along the coastline toward the south, heading toward the safety of the city of Stabii or the open country. You look back one last time at Pompeii, the grand city of luxury villas, grand temples, and booming markets, is being systematically erased from the face of the earth, disappearing beneath a blank, uniform shroud of gray volcanic debris. But as you look at the thousands of refugees walking alongside you in the dark, breathing the fresh air of the open countryside, you realize something extraordinary. In the original timeline of history, over 2,000 people perished inside the walls of Pompeii, trapped by their own complacency and lack of warning. But because of your 24-hour campaign of psychological warfare, economic manipulation, and religious disruption, you have completely rewritten the statistics. You managed to clear out over 80% of the population before the mountain ever blew its top. You saved the merchants, you saved the laborers, and you even saved the family of the garum tycoon Scaurus, who are now sailing safely across the bay toward Naples. When modern archaeologists dig up this alternate version of Pompeii 2,000 years in the future, they will find a completely different story. They will find empty streets, cleared-out houses, and storage vaults stripped of their valuables. They will find a city that did not die in a state of sudden, helpless shock, but a city that recognized the signs, defied the odds, and successfully evacuated its citizens, all because a single time-traveling stranger knew exactly how to talk to the ancient world. You didn't just survive the wrath of Vesuvius, you beat it at its own game. Just remember, if you ever find yourself looking at a beautiful green mountain that hasn't erupted in centuries, check the local water supply first.